Hey, welcome to the channel. It is time for another story. Yes, it is Fiction Friday. Time for another short story of exactly 1,000 words, inspired by a piece of artwork, written on the spot without an outline. I know, you guys know the drill. I don't know why I keep repeating myself. I guess for the new people stumbling and wondering what the hell this thing is. But at the time of this recording, we are doing a read-along book club with Donald Ray Pollock's Knock 'em Stiff, and I'm enjoying it so much. And needless to say, I was inspired by the work, as well as the artwork, obviously. And you may be saying to yourself, well, I've seen it. It looks kind of like a Western. Now, I know Donald Ray Pollock is Southern Gothic. How did you mix the two? Well, I'm glad you asked. You will find out shortly. And it's a bit of a twist. It's not a completely straightforward story. One that I did not see coming whatsoever until I got to the end. And to accompany my writing, I listened to, of course, The Devil All the Time soundtrack by a bunch of different artists. The score of the film based on the novel of the same name by the same man, Donald Ray Pollock, another one which I enjoyed very much, but I read it before I started doing this channel, so there is no review here, but I highly suggest it. But anyway, cue up the soundtrack to get in the mood while we check out this week's artwork. This week's artwork is titled Cornered, and it's by an artist named Heath Srodawa, who does concept, visual development, art direction, and illustration out of Los Angeles, California. So let us take a closer look at this artwork. We have a man with a knife. He is apparently fending off some wolves who are slowly approaching him in broad daylight, and I thought that was kind of interesting, considering as far as I know, wolves are more nocturnal and probably would be hunting someone at night. But regardless, I really like the composition. I like the action in it. I like the anticipation of what is about to happen. So much art, I feel like, is action happening, at least when you're dealing with an action piece. This one is where it's about to happen. So it almost really does feel like a frame in a film where you can just see what's going to happen next and you really want to know what's going to happen next. I wasn't sure where to take this one, a literal action scene or something else, but I love the kinetic nature of the brushstrokes and I love the composition. So Heath, thank you so much for this artwork, and hopefully my story will do it justice. So with that said, let's see what I came up with. Mammy always said I'd die at the hands of a pack of wolves, to which I'd answer, wolves don't have hands. I'd get the switch real bad every time I said it, but it was worth it. Seeing the look in her eyes, which weren't unlike those of wolves that hit the headlights, like those fancy new reflecting things they put out on Nettle Highway. Not that I'd ever seen any, wolves that is. Just heard stories, both from the woman who lashed me good when I spoke of them, and from the man who didn't give a shit if I ever spoke at all. Simon Says, he called me after that game that just came out where you try to remember the colors. He laughed himself ripe every time, seeing as I didn't talk much. Purple as a plum he got, more like a bruised nutsack with his neck veins running all the way to the top of his bald head, where all was left were a few scraggly black hairs. I hear ya. Calling him a dickhead would have made more sense, but you didn't know my pap. I swear on his grave, which I dug myself in the deep of winter, that his head looked far more like a nutsack than a dick. I told him that once, all of it, even how his head looked more like a nutsack than a dick. It was like the words had no meaning, and for the span of Reggie's tongue curl yawn, who lay at his feet, he just sat there with his hands tucked into the front pocket of his overalls, where he kept saltwater taffy from California. I could hear the wax paper rustling like the dead leaves outside my window that always woke me from sleep, wind or not. He must have been so stunned I said a damn word. He got so purple it was almost black, and his eyes, the whites usually yellow from all the piss he was full of, glared at me, ready to pop from their sockets. I swear I heard steam begin to whistle from his ears, but I ran like hell before I saw any. Through the 2 acres of land we had I ran, tearing through thickets that lashed me harder than anything Mammy had sent my way. Dove through the tire swing on the old oak just for sport, 'cause I was feeling good, feeling nimble, and I thought even if a pack of wolves was chasing me, I could turn around and blow them a raspberry, even drop trowel and shake my ass at them before they'd make it to me, and I'd still outrun them. Simon Says, fuck you all to hell! I shouted at them wolves and Mammy and Pap who shook their fists on the porch of our shit-stack house, like cartoon villains. Mammy did almost have a mustache, and I laughed at that, still running with my head turned, watching them all dwindle into the distance. Then something stopped me cold. Cold being the right word, 'cause that's what I felt running from my heel to the bottom of my spine, like all the bones in my leg had become one giant icicle. I was afraid to look down, 'cause I knew it couldn't be no good, and the wolves were coming. So I kept going, fast as I could, tumbling down the canal bank with my peg leg. I hooked my finger to take my mind off it, but I ain't never heard of no pirate getting away from a pack of wolves, let alone Pap's 52 Chevy pickup, no matter how rusted or beat up it was. And the ladder barreled down the old road leading from house to highway, pluming like a freight train running on Pap's hellfire. I was halfway across the canal when I saw the blood in the water. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light, the sun being so low and all, burning off the smoke and fire from the coal-fired plant at the edge of town. But it wasn't that time of year when the sun turned red, so I knew it was me. The cold I'd felt turned to fire, and I couldn't help but throw my head back and scream. My voice at the time was still riding the edge between man and boy, so it sounded like a dying squawk of one of them old ringnecks Pap is always trying to rid the fields of. God damn, it hurt, like nothing I'd ever felt. I just knew I had to keep going, cross the highway, maybe hole up a while in that abandoned van behind Molly's corner store she used for extra storage. I did make it to the highway, stopped like I did in the canal, about halfway. Again, to see red in the form of a truck bigger than one I'd ever seen. Lying here in bed, some 20 years later, I still can't see it. They told me what it was. I even saw pictures. But for some reason I can't see it in my mind. The only picture I see now is of the old TV sitting on a folding chair across the room, which I share with a dead man. They don't know it yet, and I haven't bothered to tell. I like the company, I suppose. And if I say something, they'll come in and take me out away from my TV, which has been playing the same movie for years, ever since I've been here. I never tire of it, even laugh sometimes. It's an old western, where this man is running from the law and hides in the woods. He's alone until he isn't. 3 wolves come out of the shadows, eyes all gleaming like they do. He takes out his knife, but he knows it won't be enough, and he waits, cornered. Welcome to the end, dear viewer. I am so glad you made it. This is where I talk about my final thoughts, what I liked, what I didn't like, maybe what I learned, and there are some mistakes here. I'm not sure if you caught them in the listen or the read, wherever you consumed this story, but let us dig into the writing and take a closer look. So as you know, this was inspired by Knock 'em Stiff, or at least tonally inspired by Knock 'em Stiff. The voice of the character, Simon, I named him, is reminiscent of that time period, that region of the country, I guess. At least hopefully I captured that, and forgive the accent. It just felt right, okay? It just felt right. But anyway, let us talk about the story. And so we begin with our protagonist talking about, in first person, that his mammy he said he would always die at the hands of a pack of wolves, to which I'd answer, wolves don't have hands. So we're dealing with a little bit of a smartass here, but all kids are in their own way. And so that is sort of setting the stage for what's to come. And we move on down. Really, this story is very short. It's about, a kid having an altercation with his parents, running, getting into an accident, and being hospital bound for the rest of his life, or up until we know him in the story. I don't know, this just came to me. This is where the name came. I wasn't even sure of what I was going to name this character, and for some reason this popped into my head, and I had to look up, like, when did this come out, and it came out in 1978, the year of my birth. This story isn't too old. Late 70s, maybe early 80s. You may be asking yourself, well, why did I choose that artwork if I took the story this way? Well, I didn't expect it. I was looking at the artwork, I liked the tone of it, I liked the composition of it, and I thought I would tell that story in this voice regardless. However, the time period kind of screwed me up, and so I had to come up with a solution. Before we get there, let's talk a little bit more about Simon's back-talking here, where he tells his dad he's more like a bruised nutsack with his neck veins running all the way up the top of his bald head. And then he told him that once, every bit of it, which really got him in trouble, in addition to his mother not being too happy about it. And I noticed this a lot in Donald Ray Pollock's writing, where he has such specificity to his writing, and I absolutely love it. It really grounds you, it really puts you in the scene, and that's kind of what happened here when I wrote, it was like the words had no meaning, and for the span of Reggie's tongue curl yawn, who lay at his feet, he just sat there with his hands tucked into the front pocket of his overalls, where he kept saltwater taffy from California. Kind of a weird image, but it just popped into my head. And again, I was trying to be as specific as I could be. I don't think there's quite as much specificity as Donald Ray Pollock has in his work, but I think some of it's close enough. And so immediately Simon just dashes out of the house. He knows he's busted, so he's running and running and running. And then I just kind of bring the wolf image back, right? I wanted to carry that through the entire thing because, as we know, it begins there and it ends there. And so I imagined him that he was, he was feeling good, feeling nimble. And I thought even if a pack of wolves was chasing me, I could turn around and blow them a raspberry, even drop trow and shake my ass at them before they'd make it to me, and I'd still outrun them. And then Simon, filled with energy, filled with glee that he's getting away from all of this, he says, "Fuck you all to hell." And then we see Mammy and Pap, who are shaking their fists on the porch like old cartoon villains. And then immediately, this is where I stop. Something hits him. Now, I never described what it was. I imagine he stepped on something. Who knows? Some kind of tool, some kind of farming equipment, something like that caused him injury. But he kept going because he was afraid. He knew he was in trouble. He crosses this canal. He finally sees the red in the water, and then also he knows his dad's coming after him in the truck, so it's going to be bad news for him. And yes, this is when he sees the blood finally. Maybe it was a trick of the light, the sun being so low and all. So he's imagining things, but he's sort of in shock, right? He's running, his adrenaline's going. He doesn't quite know he's injured, but he realizes it once he sees it. And finally, he screams. He screams in agony, but he's a kid, right? So he's still riding the edge between a man and a boy, so you can imagine what that sounds like. And then I further emphasized that with, it sounded like the dying squawk of one of them old ring necks Papa's always trying to get rid of the fields of. That's a type of pheasant I looked up. I have no idea if it's accurate in terms of where a pheasant would be or in this part of the country. And, I never really say where this is exactly, so hopefully it works. And then he's thinking, like, where am I going to go? Maybe I can hole up a while in this abandoned van behind Molly's corner store she used for extra storage. And that again is inspired by Knock 'em Stiff, at least tangentially. But he stops. This is where he gets hit by the truck, and I think this is one of the parts where I'd like to be a little more specific. I'm not sure if I was specific enough for you to get that. So we see red in the form of a truck bigger than one I'd ever seen. And then we flash forward. Lying here in bed some 20 years later, I can still see it. Meaning his mind is still screwed up from the accident, even though he has seen pictures of this truck. They have shown him. But we do know that there's an old TV sitting in a folding chair across the room. Another thing I wish I should have been clearer about is that he was in a hospital. I don't know if you quite got that, because when I bring up the dead man sitting next to him, I don't know if you thought maybe he killed him or if he's just a hospital patient. Again, I don't really allude to it. I'm assuming that, or he's assuming that you know exactly what's going on. He's having more of a conversation with you at this point rather than being really specific, trying to bring you up to speed on everything. But he doesn't want anyone to come in and take this TV out if they find this dead body. And this TV has been playing the same movie for years. It's a Western where a man is running from the law and hides in the woods. He's alone until there isn't. And then three wolves are coming out of the shadows, eyes all gleaming. And he takes out a knife, but he knows it's not going to be enough. And he waits cornered, which is the title piece of this artwork and the story. So it's funny, in one paragraph, I create the image you see here, whereas maybe you're wondering the entire time, like, where is this thing going? I don't understand how this relates whatsoever to these wolves, other than the fact that I've brought up wolves previously, but not so much in the context of the artwork. And anyway, one of the mistakes I made here, outside of the specificity, was I mentioned he buried his father in the deep of winter right here. I swear in his grave, which I dug myself in the deep of winter, that his head looked far more like a nutsack than a dick. But anyway, that's an error, because if he's been in the hospital for 20 years, how could he have dug the grave of his father? So that's something I'm going to have to fix. Overall, I'm happy with it. I enjoyed where it went. It was really fun writing in this kind of voice. The writing time was pretty quick. I believe it was about an hour, maybe a little under an hour. And it's funny, first person for me just really flows. I think it's because you quickly discover the voice, especially when it's so iconic, like someone like this, a regional accent. It may have been the first continuity error I've made in one of these stories. Normally I'm pretty good about it, but I don't really do a lot of time jumps in these, so that's probably why I haven't run into it before. But let me know, what did you think? Did I capture the feeling of that? Did anything make sense? Were the details that I left out confusing, or did you understand where I was getting at with the story? And the most exciting thing about this was that I screwed up. So I chose this artwork that appears like it's a Western, but then the story itself and the time period is not at all. And so I had to figure out, how am I going to get this here? And I remember when I was writing the story, I was like, well, maybe he decides to go old school and like get some cowboy outfit and goes out into the woods. I had no idea. And then I thought, well, maybe he gets in an accident. And then this is just some TV show he's been watching or imagining he's watching. Maybe it is the words of his mother echoing through time, manifesting in a TV show through the pixels on the screen. Who knows? That is up to you. The story is yours now. I hope you enjoyed it. But as always, if you'd like to support the channel, give the video a like if you liked it, subscribe for story-related content, and keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else, promise. Thanks again.